Hi there, Chris Guthrie from the Office of Digital Learning, and this little portion of our course is going to talk about the critical component of establishing classroom norms and routines and how to utilize those to have a successful blended learning classroom. Taking time to establish the norms and expectations with your students is key. Think about the scenarios when students need to hold themselves accountable for their learning, and then use this to lead them to create a live document of norms and expectations. After you've created those expectations with them, make sure you post them around the room and make a point of referring to these norms before students begin collaborating or their independent work. I particularly like to focus on one based on recent observations and then ask the students to select one that they particularly find might be interfering with their productivity. You also want to, throughout the year, check with the students to see what adjustments might need to be made. Remember, you want to keep that live working document. And so throughout the year, make adjustments. Add ones that need to be added. Take away ones that they have just mastered. It's no longer something we need to remind them of because you want to keep the list small. You don't want a ton of things. You can't have it too long. And then hold your students accountable to those norms. Redirect them using the norms that are posted on your on their expectation sheet. Revisit them actively and occasionally and during check-ins. If you need to redirect someone, use that language. If you want to celebrate, use that language. And then, I like to go in and I'll say to a team at the end every once in a while, how did your team do on my goal setting, the goal that I wanted? Was there one that you felt you did particularly well? Individuals, is there one that you want to share with that you felt you did really well with? It just reinforces the positive use of these norms and expectations. Here's an example of a collaborative work norm. I found the categories during my studies, and I really found those categories: group processing, positive independence, promote interaction, accountability, and teamwork as the norms that I was going to require. However, I asked the students to generate an action, that verb that went with that group. And so they created the verb component of them. Remember, it's so important for them to develop their own set of norms, and so they can hear their own voices and know that their contributions have value. Nothing wrong with selecting the categories and then let them select the verb to go with it. Have you helped your students understand expectations for working independently? I have found across the board from kindergarten through 12th grade that is something we often forget to do. So here's an example of what my former 5th grade students generated. I would have never thought of that heads up, but they wanted it added. They said that, when they're laying down or putting their head down, they just feel like they're too tired and they don't really work as productively as they had hoped. So by putting it on the norm, that was a reminder to them. As the students grow, you remember you want to keep this a live document. As they grow and become more independent, do some things go away and do you add others? Finally, this is something else that I discovered was hugely impactful when I implemented it within my classroom. And that is, students really just didn't know how to unstick themselves, quote unquote. And so we just generated a list of unstuck strategies that would foster their agency to not wait for the teacher to constantly be the quote unquote unsticker. And so they started generating some of these. Now, I'll be honest, number 4 is one that I generated with them because I trained my students that I don't understand is not a question I can answer. I don't get it is not something that's going to be productive in helping you move forward. So when I say create a question that can be answered, then they have to go back in and look at their confusion to ask myself, the teacher, or the classmate. I also held my students accountable for I don't know what to do, that was just never going to be answered. I always made sure that I had the directions in multiple places. I had reviewed them before they had to go do either something collaboratively or independently. So I wasn't repeating something 20 million times. That's only fostering their unsticking by the teacher. And so that was something that was non-negotiable. And the last thing that you'll notice is that there just are some times that they've gotten through all the unstuck strategies and they just can't figure it out. So I had a little signal that I had them put on the edge of their desk. I just use little poker chips. Some people you can use a little help button. You can have a red little card, whatever you want to put on there. It's discreet that when I was not working with students in between either groups that I was working with or in between student conferences, I would quickly do a walk around, see if anyone had the poker chip on their table, grab it, talk to them a little bit. I always first ask them, tell me what unstuck strategies you've used, just to reinforce. Eventually I didn't need to do that anymore. But this is key to independent work. This is also key to collaborative work. I'm not unsticking you. What are you going to do? So setting up class norms and expectations and utilizing them as those live documents and reminders are key to successful blended learning classrooms. There is also the understanding that if you have multiple classes, you don't want to have a list of 7 different norms for group work, 7 different norms for individuals, 7 different norms for unstuck. So basically what I always recommended is that you create them, you find what they have in common, then you present them to the class the next day and say, hey, this is what collectively came up. Are we okay with these? Are there any that we would that are missing that you feel need to be added on there? Their voices are still heard, but you don't have your walls plastered. And so in closing, I just want you to remember that when working with students to create norms and expectations, it's going to give everyone that language for productivity and accountability. And therefore, you're fostering student agency every time they start to work, and it will allow your classroom to open up where you don't have to feel like you are the only person that can solve all the problems.